Systems don't. Every system, education, employment, media, finance is built on incentives, and those incentives are rarely aligned with your freedom. They're aligned with control, predictability, and profit, just not yours. Think about it. You're taught to go to school, get good grades, land a stable job, work for decades, and maybe retire comfortably if nothing goes wrong. That's not a wealth strategy, that's a compliance strategy. And here's the harsh truth most people won't say out loud. If your income depends on someone else's permission, you're not free, you're rented. Let that sink in. Because freedom isn't about having money. It's about having control. Control over your time, your decisions, your direction. And control only comes when you understand the game well enough to stop playing it by default. Now, here's where things get interesting. Most people think the game is about working harder, grinding longer, sacrificing more. That's what they've been told. That's what sounds noble. But effort without direction is just wasted energy. The real players, they don't just work hard, they position themselves, they understand leverage, they play strategically, and most importantly, they question everything. Because the moment you start questioning the structure, you start seeing cracks in it. You start realizing that the path you are given isn't the only path. It's just the most convenient one for the people who benefit from you staying on it. And this is where the shift begins. Because once you see the setup, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how people trade their time for money without ever asking how to make money work for them. You start seeing how consumption is marketed as success, while ownership is quietly built behind the scenes by those who understand the game. And that leads to another principle: rich people buy time. Everyone else sells it. Time is the only asset you can't replace. Money? Money? You can lose it and make it back. Status? It comes and goes. But time? Once it's gone, it's gone. So the question becomes, what are you doing with yours? Are you investing it into systems that compound, or are you spending it on cycles that repeat? Because here's the difference. Workers trade time for money. Players use time to build assets. Winners build systems where money flows. Without their time, that's the hierarchy. And most people never move past the first level because they're too busy surviving to start thinking strategically. But survival isn't the goal. Freedom is, and freedom requires a different mindset. It requires you to detach from approval, to stop making decisions based on what looks good and start making decisions based on what works, to stop chasing validation and start building value. Because validation is temporary. Value compounds. And this is where most people get stuck again, because building value is hard. It requires discipline. It requires patience. It requires thinking long-term in a world addicted to short-term rewards. But if you can master that, you separate yourself instantly. You stop reacting, you start designing, you stop following, you start leading yourself first. And that's the real game. Not dominance over others, not proving anything to anyone, but mastering your own direction in a world designed to distract you from it. Let me give you something to remember. The game isn't fair, but it is predictable if you understand it. That's your edge. Not luck, not talent, not even resources. Understanding. Because once you understand the game, you stop being emotional about outcomes. You stop taking losses personally. You start seeing everything as data, feedback, adjustment. And that's how you win. Not once, but consistently. Now let's talk about money, because this is where everything converges. Money is not just currency, it's leverage. It's a tool that amplifies decisions. If you're disciplined, it accelerates growth. If you're reckless, it accelerates collapse, which is why the foundation isn't money, it's behavior. Money doesn't change who you are, it exposes it. So, before you chase millions, you better understand yourself, your habits, your impulses, your weaknesses. Because whatever is uncontrolled at a small level will destroy you at a large one. This is why so many people make money and lose it. They never built the discipline to keep it. They never learned the principles behind it. They played the game emotionally instead of strategically, and the system, it's perfectly designed to take that money right back. Which brings us back to where we started. The setup. It's not about keeping you broke, it's about keeping you predictable, because predictable people are easy to control. But once you break that pattern, once you start thinking independently, acting intentionally, and building strategically, you become something very different. You become unpredictable. And that's where power begins. So here's your challenge moving forward. Start questioning everything. Your habits, your income, your goals, your environment. Ask yourself, did I choose this or was it chosen for me? Because the moment you start choosing consciously, you step out of the setup. And once you're out, you don't go back. Now that you've seen the surface of the setup, it's time to go deeper. Because awareness alone doesn't change your life. It just removes your excuses. Execution is what changes everything. And here's where most people fail. They wake up to the truth and then do nothing with it. They nod, they agree, they feel that spark of clarity. But then they fall right back into the same routines, the same patterns, the same comfortable traps that keep them exactly where they are. Why? Because breaking out of the setup isn't just about thinking differently. It's about living differently and tasting. And that requires something most people avoid: risk. Not reckless risk, not gambling, strategic risk. Because let me make something very clear. You cannot build an extraordinary life by playing it safe. Safe is predictable. Safe is crowded. Safe is controlled. And if you're still playing safe, leverage is what allows one decision to produce 10 results. Leverage is what allows one move to scale beyond your direct effort. Leverage is how you stop trading hours for dollars and start building something that works even when you don't. And once you understand leverage, you start seeing the world differently. You stop looking for jobs. You start looking for systems. You stop chasing income. You start building assets. And this leads to one of the most important financial freedom principles you'll ever understand. If it doesn't scale, it doesn't free you, let that hit. Because most people are stuck in income streams that require their constant presence. The moment they stop working, the money stops. That's not income. That's dependency with a paycheck. Real players, they build things that continue producing: businesses, investments, networks, systems. They create engines, and engines don't ask for permission. They generate results. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable again. Because building leverage requires patience, and patience is rare. We live in a world addicted to speed, instant results, immediate gratification, quick wins. But the truth? A fast money is usually fragile. The real money, the kind that changes your life, your family, your future, that money is built slowly, strategically, and intentionally. And here's the paradox most people don't understand. The slower you build it, the faster it grows later. Because you're building foundations, not just outcomes. You're building discipline, not just income. You're building systems that compound over time. And compounding, that's where the real magic happens. Small wins stack. Smart decisions multiply. Consistency turns average moves into extraordinary results, but only if you stay in the game. And that's another truth you need to hear. Most people don't fail because they lose. They fail because they quit too early. They chase something, don't see results immediately, and assume it's not working. But what they don't realize is they quit right before the curve starts rising. Right before the system starts paying off. Right before things get interesting. And that's why discipline beats talent every time. Because talent without consistency is wasted potential. But discipline? Discipline shows up whether it feels like it or not. Discipline builds when motivation disappears. And discipline is what separates those who talk about change from those who actually create it. Now let's take this even further, because leverage isn't just financial. It's psychological. It's social. It's strategic. The way you think is leverage. The people you surround yourself with, that's leverage. Your reputation, your network, your skill set, those are all forms of leverage. And if you ignore them, you limit yourself. But if you build them intentionally, you multiply your opportunities. Which leads to another principle. Your environment either accelerates you or traps you. Look around. Who are you listening to? Who are you learning from? Who are you spending your time with? Because if you're surrounded by people who think small, act safe, and avoid risk, you will too. Not because you want to, because it's normalized. But when you step into environments where people think bigger, move faster, and operate strategically, you're forced to level up. Your standards change, your expectations rise, your actions follow. And this is why proximity is power. Not just who you know, but who you're close enough to learn from, observe, and collaborate with. Because success leaves patterns. And when you're close enough to see those patterns, you can replicate them. Now let's bring this back to money again. Because money follows value, always. not effort. Not intention, not need, value. And value is created when you solve problems at scale. The bigger the problem you solve, and the more people you solve it for, the more value you create. And the more value you create, the more leverage you gain. Which is why the real question isn't, how can I make money? It's, how can I become valuable enough that money has to come to me? That's the shift, because chasing money puts you in a reactive position. Building value puts you in control, and control is the ultimate goal. Control over your time, control over your income, control over your direction, because without control, you're just reacting to whatever life throws at you. And that's not freedom, that's survival. So now you have a choice. You can go back to what's familiar, back to what's safe, back to what's predictable. Or you can step further out, start building leverage, start thinking long-term, start playing the game at a level most people never even realize exists. Because once you see it, you can't ignore it. And once you start acting on it, everything changes. Now we're getting into territory most people never reach, not because it's hidden, but because it requires a level of honesty most people avoid. Because at this stage, it's no longer about awareness. It's about positioning. And positioning is everything. You can be smart, disciplined, even motivated, but if you're in the wrong position, you lose anyway. And the brutal truth is, a life doesn't reward effort equally. It rewards leverage and positioning. That's why you see people working twice as hard and earning half as much. It's not fair, but it is predictable. Because the game was never designed to reward effort alone. It rewards impact, scale, timing, access. And once you understand that, you stop focusing only on what you're doing, and you start focusing on where you're doing it, who you're doing it with, and how it compounds. Let's break that down. Most people think success is about grinding harder in their current situation. Wrong move. If the environment is limited, your results will be limited, no matter how hard you push. That's why one of the most important shifts you can make is this. Don't just improve your effort. Upgrade your arena, because the same skill in a different environment can produce 10x the outcome. The same mindset in a better network can create exponential opportunities. The same discipline applied to scalable systems can change your entire trajectory. And yet most people stay where they are because it's familiar, because it feels safe, because leaving means uncertainty. But here's the reality. Staying in the wrong environment is the most expensive decision you'll ever make. Not immediately, but over time. Because time amplifies everything. If you're in the right place, it multiplies your growth. If you're in the wrong place, it compounds your stagnation. Not the illusion of it. Power isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't chase attention. Real power is quiet, controlled, and strategic. It's the ability to influence outcomes without forcing them. It's the ability to walk away from bad deals, bad environments, bad situations without hesitation. And that leads to one of the most important principles you'll ever understand. The person who can walk away holds the power. Think about that. If you need the deal, you've already lost leverage. If you need the approval, you've already given up control. If you need the outcome, you're no longer negotiating, you're hoping. And hope is not a strategy. This is why independence is so critical. Financial independence, mental independence, emotional independence. Because every form of dependence reduces your power, and every layer of independence increases your options. Options are everything, because when you have options, you don't settle, you choose. Now let's connect this back to money, because money is one of the most powerful tools for positioning if you use it correctly. Most people use money to consume, to signal status, to impress others. But real players, they use money to acquire assets, access, and influence. They buy into opportunities. They invest in environments. They create networks that open doors most people don't even know exist. And this leads to another principle. Money spent to impress is lost. Money invested in leverage multiplies. Every dollar you earn has a decision attached to it. Consume it or deploy it. And that decision determines your future, because small financial decisions compound into massive outcomes. Now, here's where things get even more strategic. Because positioning isn't just about where you are. It's about how you're perceived, your reputation, your presence, your perceived value. These are all invisible assets, and in many cases, they're more powerful than money, because perception influences opportunity Opportunity influences access, and access influences outcomes, which is why you need to understand this. You don't get paid for who you are. You get paid for how valuable you're perceived to be. That's the game. Not fake it, not manipulate it, but understand it and build yourself accordingly. Increase your competence, increase your results, increase your visibility in the right environments, and let perception align with reality. Because when those two match, you become undeniable. Now let's go deeper into control, because at the highest level, this is what everything leads to. Control over your time, control over your income, control over your decisions, and most importantly, control over your direction. Because without direction, even success can become a trap. You can make money and still feel stuck. You can achieve goals and still feel lost. Because if you didn't choose the direction, you're just succeeding in someone else's plan. And that's not freedom. That's just a more comfortable version of the same setup. So, here's the shift you need to make now. Stop asking, what should I do next? Start asking, what position puts me in control long-term? Because short-term wins without long-term positioning are distractions. They feel good, they look good, but they don't build anything sustainable. And sustainability is the real goal, because anyone can win once. Very few can win consistently. And consistency comes from structure, from systems, from positioning, from leverage, from discipline applied over time. Now let me leave you with something that most people won't understand until it's too late. You are always one decision away from a completely different trajectory. One move, one shift in environment, one change in strategy, one decision to stop playing small, and everything starts to change. But that decision, it requires clarity, it requires courage, and it requires action, because without action, none of this matters. Not the awareness, not the strategy, not the potential. Action is what separates those who see the game from those who win it. At this point, you're no longer blind to the game. You see the structure, you understand leverage, you recognize positioning. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people never cross. Seeing the game doesn't mean you're playing it well. Because the hardest part isn't awareness, it's transformation. It's becoming the kind of person who can actually execute at the level required to win. And this is where identity comes in. Because whether you realize it or not, everything you do is tied to how you see yourself, your standards, your habits, your tolerance for risk, your willingness to act. All of it flows from identity. And here's the problem. Most people try to change their results without changing their identity. That never works, because your identity always pulls you back to what feels familiar. Which is why you can have moments of motivation, bursts of discipline, even short-term success, and still fall back into the same patterns. Because deep down, you haven't changed who you are, and this leads to one of the most important shifts in the entire journey. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your identity. Let that hit. Because if your identity is still tied to comfort, safety, and approval, you will sabotage any move that threatens that, even if that move leads to growth, even if that move leads to freedom. This is why execution is so difficult. Not because you don't know what to do, but because doing it requires becoming someone different, someone more disciplined, more focused, more willing to take calculated risks, more comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is where the real separation happens. Because most people want results, but very few are willing to become the person required to sustain them. Now here's how you start shifting that. Not through motivation, not through hype, through standards. Because standards define behavior, and behavior defines outcomes. So if you want different outcomes, you need higher standards. Non-negotiable ones, the kind that don't change based on how you feel, the kind that don't bend under pressure, the kind that become part of who you are. And this brings us to another principle. A discipline is not something you do. It's someone you become. It's not occasional. It's not conditional. It's consistent. And once discipline becomes part of your identity, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making excuses. You stop delaying action. You just execute. Now let's connect this to financial freedom, because this is where most people break. They understand money. They understand investing. They understand leverage, but they don't have the discipline to apply it consistently, and consistency is everything. Because wealth is not built in big moments. It's built in small, repeated decisions. What you do daily with your money, what you prioritize, what you avoid, what you invest in, And this leads to a principle that sounds simple, but most people ignore. A financial freedom is a behavior before it's a number. You don't suddenly become disciplined when you have money. You bring discipline with you, and that's why you keep it. This is why people who win the lottery often lose everything, and people who build wealth slowly keep it, because one is luck, the other is identity. Now let's go deeper into execution, because at this level, execution is no longer about doing more. It's about doing what matters, relentlessly. Then, without distraction, without deviation, because distraction is one of the biggest weapons of the setup. Endless content, endless noise, endless opportunities that lead nowhere. And while you're distracted, you're not building, you're not compounding, you're not progressing, which is exactly how most people stay stuck. So here's the shift. A focus is more valuable than effort, because effort without focus is scattered. But focused effort, that's where results multiply. That's where momentum builds. That's where things start to compound. And compounding is still the most powerful force in the game, not just financially, but in skills, in networks, in reputation, in opportunities. Every day you execute with clarity, you build momentum. Every day you stay consistent, you strengthen your position, and over time, you become very difficult to compete with, not because you're the smartest, but because you're the most consistent. Now let's talk about something most people avoid: sacrifice, because you can't have everything, at least not at once. And trying to, that's how you end up average at everything. Which means you need to decide what matters most right now. What are you building? What are you prioritizing? And what are you willing to give up to get there? Because every yes comes with a no attached, and successful people understand that. They don't chase balance in the beginning. They build momentum, then they create balance later. And that's a hard truth, but it's real. Now let's tie this all together. At this stage, your success comes down to three things: clarity, discipline, execution. Clarity shows you the path. Discipline keeps you on it. Execution moves you forward. Remove any one of those and progress stops, but combine them, you become unstoppable over time. And time is your greatest ally if you use it correctly, because while most people waste time reacting, you're building something that compounds. So, while most people chase quick wins, you're creating long-term leverage. While most people stay comfortable, you're evolving. And evolution is the ultimate advantage, because the version of you that started this journey is not the version that finishes it, and that's the point. So, here's what you need to lock in right now. You don't wait until you're ready. You act until you become ready, because readiness is a myth. Confidence is built through action. Clarity is built through movement, and success, that's built through consistency over time. At this stage, you're no longer trying to figure things out. You've already separated yourself from the majority. You think differently. You act differently. You act differently. You move with intention. But now comes the level where most people plateau, not because they fail, but because they stop evolving. And that's the hidden danger of success, because success can make you comfortable. And comfort, that's the silent killer of progress, which is why you need to understand this. What got you here will not get you to the next level. Let that settle in, because the habits, strategies, and mindset that created your initial progress will eventually become your limitations if you don't upgrade them. And this is where mastery comes in. Mastery is not about doing more, it's about doing better, sharpening your thinking, refining your execution, eliminating inefficiencies, and most importantly, scaling what works. Because at this level, it's no longer about effort, it's about precision, the right moves, at the right time, with the right leverage. Now here's where the real separation happens. Most people, when they start seeing results, increase consumption, better lifestyle, more spending, more distractions disguised as rewards. But the few who actually build long-term power, they double down on investment. They reinvest into assets, not into systems, into opportunities that expand their reach. And this leads to a critical financial principle. A lifestyle is a liability. Assets are freedom. Every upgrade in lifestyle comes with maintenance, more expenses, more pressure, more dependency. But assets, they pay you. They reduce pressure. Honda D, they increase options. And options are still the ultimate goal, because when you have options, you control outcomes. Now let's talk about scaling, because this is where the game changes again. You cannot dominate long-term by relying only on your own effort. It doesn't matter how disciplined you are. Your time is limited. Your energy is finite. which means if everything depends on you, you've built a ceiling, and ceilings are meant to be broken. So here's the shift. If it relies on you, it will eventually limit you. That's why real players build systems. They build teams. They build structures that operate without constant input. They create machines that produce results even when they step back. Because that's how you scale. And scaling is how you move from success to dominance. Now here's something most people misunderstand. Scaling is not just about doing more. It's about removing yourself from what doesn't require you. Delegating low-value tasks, automating repeatable processes, focusing only on high-leverage decisions. Because your value is no longer in doing everything. It's in directing what matters most. And this is where your role evolves. You're no longer just executing. You're designing. You're not just building income. You're building infrastructure. Create stability, which leads to sustainability, That's how you stay in the game long enough to win big. Food. Now let's go deeper into control. Because this is where mastery becomes visible. At this level, control is not about force, it's about alignment. Aligning your time with your priorities, money, with your strategy actions, with your long-term vision, because when those three align, everything accelerates. But when they don't, you feel friction, confusion, stagnation. And most people live in that state without even realizing it, which is why clarity must be maintained, not just achieved once. Because the higher you go, the more complex the decisions become, the more distractions appear. The more opportunities compete for your attention. And not all opportunities are equal. In fact, many of them are traps. Good opportunities that distract you from great ones, which is why you need this principle locked in. And not all money is good money. Not all opportunities are worth taking. Because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And at this level, bad yesies are expensive. They cost time, focus, momentum, which is why restraint becomes power. Knowing when to say no, knowing when to walk away, knowing when something doesn't align, even if it looks good on the surface. Now let's bring this back to identity again, because at mastery level, identity is everything. You are no longer building habits. You are embodying standards. You don't think about discipline. You operate through it. You don't chase results. You expect them because your systems produce them. And this is where confidence becomes different. It's no longer loud. It's no longer performative. It's quiet, controlled, certain because it's backed by experience, by repetition, by proof. And that kind of confidence, it doesn't need validation. Now here's the final shift before the last stage. You move from growth to legacy because at some point it stops being just about you. It becomes about what you're building beyond yourself, what systems you leave behind, what impact you create, what level of control you maintain long term. And this is where most people either step up or fade out. Because legacy requires vision. It requires thinking beyond immediate rewards. It requires building things that last. And most people, they're too focused on now to think about later. But the ones who do, they change everything. So here's what you need to understand as you move into the final stage. A short-term success is easy. Long-term dominance is intentional. It requires discipline at a higher level, awareness at a deeper level, execution at a sharper level, and the willingness to keep evolving even when you're already winning. Because the moment you stop evolving, you start declining. And in this game, standing still is losing. At this point, there's no more theory left. No more figuring it out. No more waiting for the right moment. Because now you understand something most people never fully accept. There is no final arrival. There is only expansion or decline. And the people who stay at the top, they choose expansion relentlessly, because the moment you think you've made it, you've already started losing. That's the paradox. Success is not a destination. It's a maintenance game. And maintaining power, freedom, and control requires a completely different mindset than achieving it. Because now, you're not just building, you're protecting, you're optimizing. You're evolving faster than the environment around you. And that leads to one of the most important truths at this level. The higher you go, the more intentional you must become. Average decisions no longer work. Average discipline no longer holds. Average thinking gets exposed fast. Because now the stakes are higher, the margins are thinner, and the consequences of bad decisions much more expensive. So what separates those who stay at the top from those who fall off? It's not luck, it's not talent, it's not even opportunity. It's control. Control over emotions. Yeah. Control over decisions. Control over direction. Because at this level, your biggest risk isn't failure, it's complacency. It's overconfidence. It's thinking you can relax when the game never stops moving. And that's why this principle matters more than ever. Success without discipline is temporary. Power without control is dangerous. You've seen it happen. People rise fast and crash even faster. They make money but can't keep it. They gain influence but lose direction. Why? Because they built success without building the structure to sustain it. And structure is everything. Your systems, your habits, your standards, your decision-making framework. These are what keep you stable no matter how volatile the environment becomes. Now let's talk about ultimate freedom, because this is what everything has been leading to. Freedom is not just financial, it's layered. Financial freedom gives you options. Mental freedom gives you clarity. Emotional freedom gives you control. But true power comes when all three align. Because you can have money and still be trapped. Trapped by fear. Trapped by insecurity. Trapped by needing validation. And that's not freedom. That's just a more expensive version of the same setup. So here's the final evolution. Freedom is the ability to act without needing approval, permission, or validation. Let that sink in. Because once you reach that level, you operate differently. You don't chase. You choose. You don't react. You decide. You don't follow trends. You create direction. And this is where the top 1% really separate, not just in money, but in mindset. Because they understand something most people don't. The game is internal before it's external, your thoughts, your discipline. Your emotional control, your ability to stay focused when everything around you is noise. That's the real battlefield. And if you win there, everything else becomes easier to control. Now let's bring this back to financial dominance. Because at the highest level, money becomes a tool, not a goal. You stop asking, how much can I make? And you start asking, how much control can I create? Because money without control is unstable. But control with money, that's power. That's when you can enter or exit opportunities without pressure, take risks without fear, walk away from anything that doesn't align, and walking away is still the ultimate flex. Because it proves one thing, you're not dependent. And dependence is the enemy of freedom. Now here's the final layer, legacy. Because at some point it stops being about accumulation. It becomes about impact. What you build, what you leave behind, what continues without you. And this is where very few people operate. Because legacy requires long-term thinking at a level most people never reach. It requires building systems that outlast you. It requires creating value beyond your own lifetime. And most people, they're too focused on short-term wins to even consider it. But the ones who do, they don't just win the game, they redefine it. So here's the final principle, the one that ties everything together. You don't win by playing harder, you win by playing smarter, longer, and with full control. That's it. Not quick wins, not shortcuts, not luck, clarity, discipline, leverage, positioning, execution, control, stacked over time. That's how dominance is built. That's how freedom is created. That's how the setup is broken permanently. And now you see it. The system, the patterns, the opportunities. More importantly, you see yourself differently. And once that shift happens, there's no going back because you're no longer reacting to the game. You're playing it with awareness, with strategy, with intent. And when you reach that level, you don't just succeed. You operate on a completely different plane.